7 decades since the Dead Sea Scrolls were discovered, around 80 new fragments of the ancient texts have been revealed to the public.
For 2,000 years, the caves of Qumran kept their silence. The Dead Sea Scrolls lay hidden, sealed away during a time of war and upheaval. Fragile parchment, cracked ink, words written by hands long gone. They were meant to endure, but perhaps not to be seen. When Bedouin shepherds stumbled upon them in 1947, they had no idea they were pulling the curtain back on the oldest biblical texts in existence. Yet even after scholars pieced together fragments and historians argued over origins, the scrolls never truly gave up their secrets. Too damaged, too faded, too broken. For decades, entire passages remained locked away in silence. But that silence has ended. Not by priests or prophets, but by a new power, machines that think in ways humans cannot. Quantum AI. For the first time in history, a system called Enoch has begun reading the unreadable. It doesn't just scan words, it sees hidden letters invisible to human eyes, reconstructs fragments no one dared to match, and rewinds time by centuries. And the results? They don't just confirm history, they fracture it. In high-tech labs from Jerusalem to Europe, scientists are stunned. Dates long guessed at by handwriting are now pinned with eerie precision. Books like Daniel and Ecclesiastes may not be later copies, but first editions, written when their authors still lived. Even more, patterns buried in the scrolls suggest codes, sequences, and secrets beyond Scripture. Some see it as revelation, others see it as danger. And deep inside this discovery lies a haunting question. Were these mysteries hidden on purpose, waiting for this exact moment to be revealed? For decades, scholars tried to make sense of the Dead Sea Scrolls. They crouched over fragments the size of fingernails, fragile scraps that broke apart at the lightest touch. Some pieces were burned, others faded into near invisibility. Hebrew, Aramaic, Greek, words half lost in ash. It was like holding a shattered mirror, each shard reflecting a part of something vast but incomplete. Historians debated origins. Were they the work of a secretive sect called the Essenes? Were they hidden treasures from Jerusalem's temple libraries, rushed into caves during war? Or were they the final warnings of prophets, sealed away for a future generation? Every theory clashed with another. What no one could deny was this. The scrolls contained some of the oldest biblical writings ever found, but their meaning, often broken mid-sentence, remained a mystery. That mystery carried danger. If these words had survived 2,000 years in silence, perhaps silence was their purpose. And yet, curiosity drove scholars forward. Piece by piece, they tried to rebuild what had been lost. Still, questions lingered like shadows. What if the unreadable fragments carried truths that could shake entire faiths? What if hidden lines rewrote history? For years, the mystery only deepened, until technology stepped in, until quantum AI began doing in seconds what humans had failed to achieve in lifetimes. The turning point came with a system called Enoch. Unlike human scholars, it didn't tire, didn't blink, didn't argue. It absorbed handwriting samples, comparing shapes, slants, and strokes of ink across fragments. Trained on scrolls already dated by radiocarbon, it built a secret calendar of style. Paleography, once an art of educated guesswork, was transformed into precision. Within minutes, Enoch could tell if a fragment came from the 3rd century before Christ or the 1st century after. The accuracy was stunning. Within about 30 years of certainty, Enoch pinned down fragments once floating across centuries. Historians who spent careers debating suddenly faced results from a machine that refused to bend. Some rejoiced. Finally, answers. Others resisted. Could cold algorithms read what was once sacred? Could a machine unlock texts never meant for human eyes? Still, the discoveries poured in. More than 130 scrolls, once undated, now had years attached to them. And many were older, far older, than anyone imagined. That revelation cracked open a larger problem. If these scrolls predated Qumran itself, then their origins had to lie elsewhere. Perhaps Jerusalem, perhaps even further back. The past, once fragile, was becoming sharper, and yet the sharper it grew, the more dangerous the questions became. Among the fragments tested was one tied to the book of Daniel, 4Q114. For decades, experts placed it around 160 BCE. Enoch disagreed. It reached back further, between 230 and 160 BCE. That single shift echoed like thunder. If Daniel's words existed then, could they have been written during the very generation when its prophecies were first spoken? Another fragment, 4QQ Coelet, linked to Ecclesiastes, was dated older than expected too. These weren't later scribal copies. They might be first editions, words flowing from authors' own hands. Such an idea rattled traditions. For centuries, scholars assumed biblical texts were copied and recopied long after their writers had died. But now, the possibility of originals rose from the dust. The implications were vast. If Daniel's visions were recorded as events unfolded, they weren't hindsight. They were prophecy, captured in real time. If Ecclesiastes reached back further, perhaps even to the era of Solomon, then parts of the Bible were closer to eyewitness truth than anyone had dared to claim. For believers, it was electrifying. For critics, it was unsettling. And for religious leaders, it raised an urgent question. If the machine was right, how much of history would need to be rewritten? The discovery sent shockwaves. Scholars who once held authority now faced a machine that challenged decades of judgment. Some celebrated, finally, clarity after generations of speculation. Others recoiled. Was it safe to let algorithms dictate the timeline of sacred scripture? Could a program, no matter how advanced, weigh the human, the spiritual, the divine?
Religious leaders voiced alarm. If these scrolls were older, if they were originals, entire doctrines could be shaken. Sermons preached caution. Statements urged silence. To some, quantum AI was no gift. It was intrusion. It trespassed on ground too holy for circuits and codes. Yet others saw prophecy fulfilled, knowledge hidden until the appointed time, ancient words speaking again through a tool never imagined by their authors. The clash became more than academic. It was spiritual war, tradition versus innovation, faith versus code, human judgment versus machine certainty. Each headline, each debate only sharpened the tension. What Enoch uncovered wasn't just ink on parchment. It was dynamite under centuries of belief. And this was only the beginning. As Enoch's scans deepened, another layer emerged. Numbers, patterns, repeated sequences that mirrored the mathematics of prime numbers and binary code. Scholars stared, stunned. Could ancient scribes have embedded encryption in their texts? Could the Dead Sea Scrolls hide codes thousands of years before computers? The possibility unsettled even skeptics. These weren't random scribbles. The patterns followed rules, like a cipher waiting to be cracked. Some dismissed them as coincidence. Others whispered of hidden wisdom, knowledge reserved for initiates, preserved in ink until machines advanced enough to read it. Then came the strangest twist. Certain number clusters aligned with ancient astronomical charts, echoing star positions recorded in Chinese maps more than 2,000 years ago. It was as if the scrolls weren't just scripture, but cosmic calendars, embedding the heavens into sacred text. What did this mean? Were the scrolls scripture alone, or manuals of encoded science, bridging heaven and earth? The line between religion and mystery blurred, and the world braced for more. The codes hinted at something deeper, mysticism older than many believed. Ideas scholars once tied to medieval Kabbalah or Gnostic sects suddenly appeared in scroll fragments. Sequences, symbols, layered meanings, all suggesting early Jewish writers encoded spiritual teachings for a chosen few.
This discovery sparked fury. To some, it was confirmation. The roots of mysticism ran far deeper than tradition allowed. To others, it was heresy, rewriting Judaism's core identity. If early Jewish scribes preserved hidden cosmology, if they wrote of hierarchies of angels, of divine mysteries encrypted in numbers, then much of what was dismissed as later invention might in fact be ancient truth. For Christianity, the implications rippled outward. What if these hidden teachings shaped the earliest believers? What if fragments of thought, concealed in scrolls, foreshadowed doctrines centuries before they emerged? Quantum AI was no longer just a tool. It had become an archaeologist of the invisible, brushing away layers of silence to reveal a faith far stranger and perhaps more dangerous than history had recorded. And with every secret revealed, one question loomed larger. Were these scrolls meant for us, or were we trespassers in a vault never meant to be opened? Dating fragments brought fresh chaos. The accepted script that Herodian style gave way neatly to Herodian collapsed. Enoch showed overlap. Both scripts, once thought separated by decades, lived side by side. Tradition resisted, but the evidence was sharp. This meant scribes didn't simply evolve their writing. They chose. They clung to old forms even while new ones rose, perhaps as resistance, perhaps as devotion. The scrolls whispered of a people under pressure, holding identity in their script, guarding heritage with pen strokes. But the revelation cut deeper. If scripts overlapped, so too might communities. What if Qumran wasn't isolated, but linked to larger Jewish and Jerusalem traditions? What if the scrolls weren't the voice of one sect, but the chorus of many? The neat lines drawn by scholars blurred into chaos, and chaos raised fear. If the very timeline of Scripture's preservation was unstable, then every assumption about authorship, copying, and transmission wavered. For some, it was exciting, a window into the complexity of faith's survival. For others, it was dangerous. Stability gave authority. Overlap meant uncertainty, and uncertainty spread like wildfire. Where did the scrolls come from? Tradition said Qumran's Essenes, quiet, disciplined, a sect removed from the world. But Enoch's dates cut holes in that story. Some scrolls predated Qumran's settlement. Others seemed too diverse in style, too varied in origin to belong to one group. Theories swirled. Perhaps Jerusalem's libraries had been raided, treasures hidden in caves as war approached. Perhaps travelers carried fragments from far-off centers, leaving a mosaic rather than a single community's record. Or perhaps multiple groups, each with different beliefs, used caves as vaults for texts too dangerous to lose or too dangerous to reveal. Each possibility shifted the story of history itself. Were the scrolls the work of rebels, priests, mystics, or prophets? Or were they all of these, stitched together in survival? The mystery was no longer just about words on parchment. It was about purpose. Why were they hidden? Why did they survive when so much else perished? And most haunting of all, why are we uncovering them now? Enoch continues scanning. Each fragment, each faint ink mark is pulled back into light. What once seemed lost forever is returning. But each answer only breeds more questions. Were these scrolls prophecy, encrypted for the future? Were they warnings sealed for an age of machines? Or are we forcing open doors that should remain shut? Already some leaders call for silence. Others demand more. The world waits as quantum AI digs deeper. If the first discoveries shook history, what happens when the last fragments are revealed? The question lingers like a shadow. Were these words meant for their time, or were they written for ours? And if quantum AI has only just begun, what will happen when it finishes?